The millionaire didn't want to dance with anyone until the cleaning lady walked in with her daughter. James, Blackwood's refusal to participate in the annual charity gala's traditional first dance had created a palpable tension throughout the grand ballroom of the Westmore Hotel, as the 38-year-old CEO of Blackwood Technologies stood stoically beside the dance floor, champagne flute in hand. The city's most eligible socialites whispered behind jeweled hands, their expressions shifting from hopeful to disappointed to indignant as one by one he declined their invitations with a polite but firm shake of his head. "Aunt James, this is ridiculous," hissed Vivian Westmore, the gala chair and his father's oldest friend. "The Blackwood Foundation Spring Gala has opened with the same waltz for 40 years. Your father never missed it, and neither should you. Times change, Vivian," James replied, his voice low and controlled. "The foundation will survive without me making a spectacle of myself tonight." The truth, which he would never share with Vivian or anyone else in the glittering crowd, was that James hadn't danced since Sarah's death 3 years ago. His wife had loved these events, floating across the floor in his arms, her laughter cutting through the orchestral music in a way that made everyone turn and smile. Now the very thought of taking another woman's hand made his chest constrict painfully. The orchestra began the opening notes of Strauss's Blue Danube, the traditional first waltz. Vivian gave him one last disappointed look before being swept away by her husband, leaving James alone at the edge of the floor. He watched the couples form, women in designer gowns worth small fortunes, men in tailored tuxedos, all benefactors of his family's charitable foundation, all expecting him to uphold traditions he now found meaningless. He was calculating how soon he could leave without causing offense, when a commotion at the service entrance caught his attention. Elena Diaz, one of the hotel's cleaning staff, whom he recognized from his frequent stays, had entered the ballroom looking flustered. Behind her stood a young girl of perhaps 16, wearing a simple blue dress that stood out amid the sea of couture like a dandelion in a rose garden. James watched with mild curiosity as Elena spoke urgently to the event coordinator, gesturing toward the girl. The coordinator shook her head firmly, pointing toward the service exit. The girl's shoulders slumped, her face falling in such profound disappointment that James found himself moving across the room before he'd made a conscious decision to intervene. "Is there a problem?" he asked, approaching the small group. The event coordinator turned, her expression instantly transforming. "Mr. Blackwood, no problem at all. Just a small staff issue we're resolving." Elena looked up at him, recognition and surprise flashing across her features. She had cleaned his penthouse suite dozens of times over the years, always professional and efficient, exchanging only the most basic pleasantries. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her accent more pronounced in her nervousness. "I am so sorry for the interruption. My daughter's school dance was cancelled last minute." A pipe burst at the gymnasium. She was so disappointed. "I thought perhaps she could just peek at the gala, see the beautiful dresses for a moment before I take her home. I didn't think anyone would mind." The girl beside her stared at the floor, clearly mortified. "Mom, it's okay. Let's just go," she whispered. James studied them both. Elena, whom he knew only as the quiet woman who kept his temporary home immaculate, wore her cleaning uniform, a simple black dress with a white collar, and looked completely out of place among the designer gowns and custom jewelry. Yet there was a dignity in her posture, a gentle strength as she placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "What's your name?" "James," asked the girl directly. She looked up, startled to be addressed by him. "Sophia, sir. And you were looking forward to your school dance?" A flush crept up her cheeks. "Yes, sir. I'm a junior. It was supposed to be our spring formal." Something shifted in James's chest, a loosening of the tight band that had constricted his heart for 3 years. Sarah would have loved this girl's earnestness, her obvious disappointment barely contained behind politeness. The event coordinator's expression tightened. "Mr. and Blackwood, I was just explaining that guests aren't permitted. Ms. Diaz and her daughter are my guests," James interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. The words surprised him almost as much as they surprised Elena, whose eyes widened. Mr. Blackwood. I couldn't possibly. Elena began, her voice low with embarrassment. I insist, James said, surprising himself with his own certainty. Then, turning to Sophia, he added, no young woman should miss her spring formal, even if it's a different one than expected. The event coordinator's smile had frozen in place, her eyes darting between James and the mother-daughter pair, clearly trying to calculate the social and professional implications of the situation. Well, if they're your guests, she conceded with a tight nod before retreating. The orchestra was still playing the waltz, couples turning gracefully across the floor. Several nearby guests had noticed the exchange, their expressions ranging from curious to scandalized. Sophia stood awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom, trying to make herself invisible, despite the simple blue dress that marked her as clearly out of place among the designer gowns. James made a decision that would shock the entire room. Sophia, would you do me the honor of joining me for this dance? The girl's eyes widened. Me? But I don't know how to waltz. It's easier than it looks, James replied, extending his hand. I can teach you the basics. Elena looked stunned. Mr. Blackwood, you don't have to do this. We should go. Please call me James, he said quietly. And I want to do this if you don't mind. Of course. After a moment's hesitation, Elena gave a small nod to her daughter. Sophia nervously placed her hand in James's and he led her carefully onto the dance floor. The reaction was immediate. Conversations halted mid-sentence, heads turned, and a wave of whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Everyone staring. Sophia murmured, her face flushed with embarrassment. They're just jealous, James said with a wink, positioning her hands correctly. Left hand on my shoulder, right hand in mine. I'll place my hand lightly on your back, and we'll just take simple steps. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Just follow my lead, awkwardly at first. Then, with growing confidence, Sophia followed his instructions. James kept the steps basic, guiding her gently around their small portion of the dance floor. The girl's initial terror gradually softened into concentration, then into a hesitant smile as she managed several turns without stepping on his feet. I'm doing it, she whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly would break the spell. You're a natural, James confirmed. As they turned, he caught sight of Elena watching from the edge of the floor. Her expression a complex mixture of gratitude, pride, and something unreadable. Vivienne Westmore stood nearby, champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips, her shock evident. Around the room, the Foundation's wealthy patrons and Boston's elite were having varied reactions. Some women looked openly appalled, while others seemed touched by the unexpected scene. James found, to his surprise, that he didn't care about any of it. For the first time in 3 years, dancing didn't feel like a betrayal of Sarah's memory. Instead, he could almost hear her approving laugh, could almost feel her nudging him forward. Sarah, who had grown up in circumstances not so different from Sophia's, who had never forgotten her roots even after their wealth had grown. As the waltz concluded, James escorted Sophia back to her mother. Thank you for the dance, he said with formal courtesy that made the teenager giggle. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, she replied. That was the best, almost spring formal ever. Elena seemed at a loss for words. We should let you return to your guests, she finally managed. Thank you for your kindness. Actually, James said, making another impulsive decision. Would you both join me for dinner? The gala meal is about to be served, and I'd welcome the company. The shock on Elena's face was evident. Sir, we couldn't possibly. I'm still on duty, and we're not dressed for I'll speak with your supervisor, James interrupted gently. And I can assure you, no one will say a word about your attire. The look that passed between mother and daughter was filled with silent communication, hesitation, excitement, concern. Finally, Elena nodded slowly. If you're certain. Completely, James confirmed, offering an arm to each of them. As he escorted them to the head table, James was acutely aware of the stir they were causing. Vivienne Westmore looked as though she might faint. Several board members appeared, confused or concerned, and the women who had been hoping to catch his attention throughout the evening watched with expressions ranging from disappointment to outrage. The dinner that followed was unlike any gala experience James had endured in years, where normally he would have navigated tedious conversations about stock portfolios and vacation properties. He found himself genuinely engaged, as Sophia enthusiastically described her advanced placement classes and dreams of becoming an engineer. "I've always been good with math and figuring out how things work," she explained, between bites of the gourmet meal, her initial shyness giving way to animated passion. "My physics teacher says I could get a scholarship if my SAT scores are high enough." Sophia ranked first in the state science competition last month, Elena added with quiet pride, "but the national competition is in Chicago," and she trailed off, the unspoken financial constraints hanging in the air. James leaned forward. "The Blackwood Foundation has a STEM education initiative. We could certainly look into sponsoring state winners to attend national competitions." Across the table, Thomas Harrison, the foundation's education director, nearly choked on his wine. "We don't currently have such a program in place," he said carefully. "And perhaps it's time we did," James replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. "In fact, I'd like you to draft a proposal by next week." The remainder of the evening unfolded with a surreal quality. Several foundation board members, following James's lead, engaged Sophia in thoughtful conversations about her academic interests. Elena remained reserved but gradually relaxed enough to share insights about her daughter's determination, how Sophia studied late into the night after completing her own work shifts at a local cafe, how they'd converted their tiny apartment's closet into a makeshift study nook. When dessert was served, Vivian Westmore finally approached their table, her social instincts overriding her initial shock. "James, won't you introduce me to your guests?" she asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Vivian, this is Elena Diaz and her daughter Sophia," James replied smoothly. "Elena has worked at the Westmore for over a decade, though I suspect her talents are significantly underutilized there." Elena looked down, a flush rising to her cheeks. "It's honest work, Mr. Blackwood. It's allowed me to keep Sophia in a good school district. Mom works harder than anyone I know," Sophia added with fierce loyalty. "She's taking online classes, too, studying business administration, whenever she's not working." This new information caught James by surprise. "Really? What are your career goals, Elena?" For the first time that evening, Elena met his gaze directly. "I want to open a small housekeeping service to create good jobs with fair wages and benefits for people like me, people who are invisible to most of the world." Something in her quiet dignity struck James profoundly. He thought of all the times she had cleaned his suite, how they had exchanged perfunctory greetings without him ever seeing the person behind the uniform. As the evening drew to a close, the orchestra began their final number. Without hesitation, James turned to Elena. "Would you do me the honor of this dance?" A hush fell over their section of the ballroom. Elena looked startled. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't think James, please," he corrected gently, "and just one dance to close the evening." After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. Unlike her daughter, Elena moved with natural grace, following his lead as if they had danced together before. "Thank you for your kindness to Sophia," she said softly. "This night means more to her than you can know." "It's meant a great deal to me as well," James replied, with unexpected honesty. "More than I could have anticipated." As they turned across the floor, James became aware of the stares following them, some disapproving, others curious, a few softening with unexpected sentiment. He found, to his surprise, that the opinions of Boston's elite mattered less to him now than the smile of quiet gratitude on Elena's face. 6 months later, the Blackwood Foundation launched 2 new initiatives: a national scholarship program for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds, with Sophia Diaz serving as its first recipient, and a small business incubator focused on service industry entrepreneurs. Its inaugural grant went To Diaz Professional Cleaning Services, a company that would quickly earn a reputation for its exceptional standards and employee benefits. And if the Foundation's annual gala the following spring featured Boston's most eligible bachelor dancing not with socialites but with a certain small business owner no longer wearing a cleaner's uniform. The city's elite had learned to hide their surprise behind polite smiles. Some even claimed they'd seen it coming all along. The night James Blackwood finally discovered there were more meaningful connections to be made than those forged in boardrooms and country clubs.